Welcome back. Last time we talked about how the ability to read hieroglyphs was lost. Today, we'll see how it was rediscovered during Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. The year is 1798, and a 28-year-old General Bonaparte has just returned to Paris, victorious from the Italian campaign. He's undefeated and a hero, and the Directory, the governing body of France, doesn't want an unemployed hero hanging around. So they suggest that he invade England, France's enemy. Bonaparte looks at France's fleet and wants no part of this venture. But he suggests an alternative: invade Egypt. There are two reasons for this, one political, one psychological. First, the political. England's economy depended to a great extent on trade with India. Egypt was England's land route to the Red Sea, which provides quicker access to India. If France could control Egypt, then England's vital trade would be cut, thus weakening the enemy's economy. This all makes political sense. Bonaparte's other reason for invading Egypt was psychological. He wanted to follow in the footsteps of his hero, Alexander the Great. Bonaparte even said that the careers of all great men begin in the East, so it's off to Egypt. Many people dislike Napoleon, but almost everyone agrees he was a genius. He was well-educated and fearless, and he wrote the Code Napoleon that still serves as the basis for French law. He was a member of the French Academy of Science in mathematics and was a supporter of the arts and sciences. And he even wrote fiction. When he prepared for the Egyptian campaign, Napoleon recruited France's top savants, scientists, who would describe every aspect of Egypt, from botany to zoology. He brought more than 150 savants, the best minds of the time. There was Joseph Fourier, the famous mathematician behind the Fourier transformation, a function used today in digital electronics and signal processing. Dolomieu, the geologist, after whom the Dolomite Mountains in Italy are named. Etienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire, the brilliant young naturalist who would later bring the first giraffe to France. There was Pierre-Joseph Redoutez, the great naturalist painter. This was an all-star cast, and they also brought their students. Jean-Baptiste Jollois and Edouard de Villiers were only 21 and 18 years old, respectively, when they went along. They teamed up for the expedition and went up and down the Nile together, recording the monuments. De Villiers took his school books with him. He was examined in Cairo by his professor and was certified as an engineer. When Bonaparte landed in Egypt, he introduced the Arabic printing press to Egypt. Believe it or not, Egypt had never printed a book in Arabic. Bonaparte looted his Arabic typeface from the Vatican. He wanted to use his presses for propaganda, to convince the Egyptian population he was there to liberate them from the Mamelukes, a fierce warrior class ruling the country. The first Arabic document ever printed in Egypt proclaimed Bonaparte's noble intentions. It didn't work. Nobody believed him. Still, this was an amazing intellectual adventure, but there was also a war to be fought. The Battle of the Pyramids was the army's first test in Egypt. They were fighting the Mamelukes. Ostensibly, Egypt was controlled by the Sublime Porte, Constantinople. But the Ottoman Empire was crumbling, and the Mamelukes had a free hand in running Egypt. Mameluk is Arabic for bought man. Centuries earlier, the Sultan of Egypt bought hundreds of young boys from the Circassian Mountains to be trained as his military elite. They were educated, well-fed, and clothed. And when they became adults, they revolted and killed the Sultan. They took control of Egypt. They lived in opulent palaces, dressed in colorful silks, but were fierce warriors. The Mamelukes were horsemen, and each went into battle with a lance, a sword, and 2 pistols. Each horseman was followed by 2 servants on foot. After the pistols had been fired, they threw them over their shoulders to the servants, who would then reload as their masters continued fighting with swords and lances. Once reloaded, the Mamelukes would ride back to their servants and retrieve the pistols. The Mamelukes had never been defeated in battle. Bonaparte's troops were disciplined, and they too were undefeated. The Mamelukes were fierce horsemen, but they fought as individuals. As the Mamelukes charged, the French held their fire, till the horsemen were practically on top of them. Then they blew them away. The battle was over in less than 2 hours. The Mamelukes were no match for a disciplined European army. Bonaparte was now in control of Egypt, but not for long. The Battle of the Nile will doom the Egyptian campaign. Vice Admiral Francois-Paul Brie has anchored the ships of the line, the fighting ships, at Abu Qir Bay, very close to shore. So close that he's convinced no one could sail between his ships and the shore. So he's positioned all his guns seaward, so that if the English find the fleet, all the firepower will be aimed at them. On August 1st, 1798, England's Rear Admiral Horatio Nelson finds the anchored fleet and goes straight into battle. He does something totally unexpected. He sails between the anchored French fleet and the shore, which Brie thought was impossible. With all their cannon fixed seaward, the French are sitting ducks, and the English blast away, sinking almost the entire fleet. When the French flagship, L'Orient, catches fire and explodes, it housed the French supply of gunpowder. It's the loudest man-made noise ever heard on Earth. It's so shocking, fighting stopped for 10 minutes. In the end, the battle is a complete victory for Nelson. With their fighting ships gone, the French are stranded with no way of getting supplies or reinforcements. You see, when you send your supply ships across the ocean, they need fighting ships, ships of the line, to protect them. Otherwise, they can just be seized. Nelson correctly assessed the situation by saying basically, Bonaparte is in a jam and he won't get out of it. And Nelson just sailed away. He wasn't going to fight any land battle. When Bonaparte heard his fleet had been sunk in Alexandria, he only mentioned that his sailors were covered in glory. He never mentioned the defeat. Undaunted, Bonaparte set up the Institut d'Egypte, a society devoted to the study of Egypt. It was the birth of Egyptology. The savants, architects and engineers, would record Egyptian temples, collect antiquities, and study flora and fauna. In a way, it's the world's first ethnographic study by a scientific team. The savants occupied palaces that were vacated by the fleeing Mamelukes and settled in for their scholarly work. But a losing war was also being fought. Bonaparte was forced to march his men to Acre, which is in Israel today, but was then in Sidon, part of the Ottoman Empire. He needed to head off an invasion of Turkish soldiers. The fort at Acre was controlled by Jejer Pasha, a ruthless man with a reputation for cruelty. Jejer means butcher in Arabic. Normally, Bonaparte could surround the fort and starve those inside into submission. But Acre was on the water, and the British were supplying Jejer from the sea. Bonaparte didn't have the needed cannons to bombard the fort, so he ordered his men to storm the fort using tall ladders. Assault after assault failed, and the loss of many men ensued. Acre was Bonaparte's first loss on land, and things were going to get worse. The army began to suffer great losses on another front. They were decimated by the plague. They had no supplies and were cut off from France. 1 year after he landed, Bonaparte deserted his men and sailed for France. Bonaparte didn't even let his army know he was leaving till he was on board his ship, heading for France. He left a letter for General Jean-Baptiste Kléber, his next in command, telling him to continue the victories, collect the taxes, and send the revenue back to Paris. Kléber was outraged. Like everyone else, he knew the Egyptian campaign was a lost cause. He immediately began to discuss with the British terms for an honorable withdrawal of French troops from Egypt. But it was not to be. Kléber was assassinated by a religious fanatic, and the discussions ended. Kléber was respected by everyone. His successor, Abdullah Manu, was not. Manu had converted to Islam so he could marry a bathkeeper's daughter and was viewed as a fool by the army he commanded. The war dragged on for another 2 years. While the army Bonaparte left behind was fighting a losing war, they shored up an old fort at Rosetta, where they discovered a large inscribed stone built into the wall near the foundation. It seemed to have the same message in 3 different scripts: one hieroglyphic, one unknown, and the third Greek. Since the savants could translate the Greek, they hoped it would be the key to deciphering hieroglyphs. In the next lecture, we'll look closely at the Rosetta Stone, but let me emphasize here that the Rosetta Stone was not the only contribution the Egyptian campaign made to the decipherment. When the savants finally returned to France, they published the Description de l'Égypte, one of the largest and most sumptuous publications in the history of the world. 5 massive volumes of engravings recorded the antiquities of Egypt. They produced the first detailed map of the Valley of the Kings. For the first time, the ancient temples and tombs were accurately drawn by Napoleon's architects and engineers. Sometimes their drawings are the only record we have of the monuments. One remarkable case is the city that the Roman Emperor Hadrian built in Egypt. While Hadrian was visiting Egypt, his young lover, Antinous, drowned in the Nile. Hadrian built an entire city, Antinopolis, as a memorial. It was fabulous, complete with wide streets, temples, triumphal arches, everything you'd expect in a Roman city. The savants realized the city's importance and recorded it in detail. It's a good thing they did. In the 1830s, the entire city was dismantled and the blocks ground into cement to build a sugar refinery. Today, all we have are the savants' drawings. There were times when they didn't even know the importance of what they were recording. This is a drawing of a great historical event. Those savants didn't know it when they copied it. It's from the now ruined temple of Armont in Upper Egypt. This temple was built by Cleopatra VII to commemorate the birth of Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar. We are looking at Cleopatra giving birth to Caesarion. She's kneeling. Women in Egypt gave birth sitting down on a birthing stool. The wall is damaged, and the artist has indicated that damage. But you can still see the newborn Caesarion's feet emerging. It's remarkable that we have a historical record of this event, and it's all thanks to Napoleon Bonaparte. Some of the savants went beyond mere recording and made important archaeological discoveries. The young friends, Jollois and Devilliers, copied the Dendera zodiac and caused a sensation in Paris when they returned. When scholars saw how the constellations were depicted on the zodiac, they were astonished. It suggested that the Egyptian civilization and the world were much older than was previously believed. Remember, hieroglyphs hadn't been deciphered yet, so no one knew how far back in time Egypt stretched. Many still believed the civilization started in Greece. Even worse, Bishop Ussher, using the begats in the Bible, calculated that the world was created 4,004 years ago, and many still believe them. The Denderah Zodiac changed all that. So the work of Jollois and de Villiers was very important to how scholars viewed the age of the world. These guys were young, but they accomplished fantastic things. They also discovered the tomb of Amenhotep III in the Valley of the Kings. They, of course, couldn't decipher the hieroglyphs, so they didn't know whose tomb they had found. But it was still a great adventure. As they explored the tomb by the light of their candles, they came upon a group of small statues. They brought them out of the tomb, did their drawings, and later published them in the Description de l'Egypte. Today, Egyptologists call these statues Ushaptis. Ushapti figures were intended as servants for the next life. The Egyptians believed that the next life would be a continuation of this life, only air-conditioned. Often, tomb walls of the nobles show painted scenes of the next world. The deceased are at banquets, hunting in the marshes, and sometimes working in the fields, but they're always in their finest linens. The statues these two young men discovered were intended to do this work. As we discussed at the very beginning of this course, the Egyptians were used to working together on public works projects. In the Old Kingdom, there were pyramids to be built, but throughout Egypt's long history, there were always irrigation ditches to be dug. So once a year, there was the corvée, a roll call for every able-bodied man to come and work for the benefit of the country. The Egyptians believed there would probably be a roll call in the next world too. So to avoid doing the work themselves, they took magical servants with them. The word Ushapti is derived from the ancient Egyptian word for answer, Usheb. The man has his hand to his mouth in the word, because the word has something to do with speaking. I have no idea what looks like an X is doing there. The little statues were called Ushaptis, because when your name was called on in the next world to work on the irrigation ditches, the little statues would come to life and answer for you. Here I am. These statues were made of various materials, depending upon what you could afford. The least expensive were terracotta, clay, sometimes only 2 inches long, mass-produced from molds. Another material commonly used was faience, a kind of ceramic fired in a kiln. These also varied in quality. Here's a small Ushapti for a poor man. The finer examples showed the deceased shaped like a wrapped mummy, holding farm implements. Here's an Ushapti of a nobleman. See, his legs are wrapped like a mummy, peeking out of the wrappings of his hands, which hold farm implements. If we turn him over, you can see his little seed pack on his back. And all along the front is a magical spell to bring him to life in the next world. Usually, it's something simple like, O Ushapti, if I am called upon to do work in the next world, answer, here I am. Plow the fields, fill the canals with water, and carry the sand of the east to the west. Jollois and de Villiers had found some of the earliest royal Ushaptis. Napoleon's savants were making all kinds of contributions to the new science of Egyptology. In addition to recording scenes, the savants published drawings of hieroglyphs, books of the dead, and inscriptions on tombs. Every time the savants saw a new hieroglyph, they added it to a table they were compiling to help in the decipherment. They did the same with cartouches. These would later provide material with which the decipherment of hieroglyphs could move forward. The Description de l'Egypte also included 2 volumes of natural history engravings, in which the savants showed Europe the birds, minerals, and plants of Egypt. But that's not all. There were even 2 volumes showing modern Egypt, Egypt as it was around 1800 when the French were there. Along with the engravings were 9 volumes of text, articles by the savants describing the fruits of their labors. It would take 22 years to publish the Description, but it contributed significantly to the beginning of Egyptology and the quest to resurrect a lost language. But the most important discovery was the Rosetta Stone. You can see it today, not in the Louvre, but in the British Museum. Remember, Napoleon lost. Next time, we'll see what the Rosetta Stone says. But now, it's time to put on your scribe's robes, get your reed brushes and ink. We are going to do some hieroglyphs. I would like to add another 10 or so words to our vocabulary, so we begin reading sentences that are more complex. Last time I asked you to translate to another place. Let's go step by step. First, we need the word for place. That's easy. It's bu. Now come the decisions. It's another place. So we have to decide if we use the masculine or feminine. What is bu, masculine or feminine? Well, it doesn't end in a loaf T, so it must be masculine. Good. So now we know to use ki, the masculine form of another. Our next question is, does another go in front of the noun or after? Yep, in front. So it's ki bu. Okay. Last word to translate is the to. We have two tos. One for people, the N water sign, and one for places, which is the mouth R. A place is a thing, so we know to use the mouth R. So our phrase, to another place, is ki bu. Note that the mouth R is right above the basket K. This is for aesthetics, so it looks nice. Normally, the Egyptians didn't merge words in this way, but if you have a single sign word, it was sometimes okay. Now, let's add some more vocabulary words and translate some real sentences. First, let me show you the hieroglyphs for man and woman, and also how to draw them. They're very important. The word for man is z. Often the word is just written with an idiom stroke, bing. Sometimes the stroke is omitted, and you have the man hieroglyph. There's a lot of flexibility when writing hieroglyphs. You have to remember this. Let me show you how to draw the man hieroglyph. Note, I altered this one a bit from the way Gardner presents it in his book. My way is to start with the head and shoulders. Now for the most important part. Draw what I call the sock. It looks like a sock, yes? Next we add the knee, then the foot sticking out, and finally the arms. The word for woman can also be written several ways. One is phonetically, with the woman determinative. It's pronounced zet. To draw the woman, start at the head and go straight down. Now add the front of the body, then do the knees drawn up beneath her dress, and that's how you draw a woman. If you want to say people, you write the man and the woman hieroglyph together. That's people. But it would have been pronounced something like rechu when spoken. Note the three strokes. That's how you indicate a plural in ancient Egyptian. Now that we can write man and woman, let's learn some verbs so they can do things and we can translate real sentences. I'll show you the hieroglyphs for a word and you pronounce it. Yes, something like you or you. This is the verb to be. The good news is it doesn't have to be conjugated. Egyptian isn't like French or Spanish. We have to worry about je suis, tu es, nous sommes, or yo estoy, right? Nosotros estamos. It stays reed, leaf, quail chick, no matter who is or who are. Same for other verbs. They don't change. Here's another. Pronounced? Yes, dejed. It means to speak or say. Good. Now a related verb. Pronounce this one, and then guess what it means from the determinative. A man with his hand to the mouth. You have the pronunciation. Ger. That's right. But what does it mean? Hint. It's related to the last verb. It's the verb to be silent. Now for another pair of related verbs. You know how to pronounce it. Yes, rech. But I bet you're wondering what the determinative is at the end. Well, it's a papyrus roll. It's been rolled up, the papyrus, tied with a string, and that little semicircle is a clay seal to ensure confidentiality. If anyone opened it, you would know because the seal would be broken. This is the verb to know. I think the idea is that knowledge can be written. Now for the related verb. Pronounce it. Yes, chem. Look at the determinative. Our previous verb meant to know. What does this one mean? Not to know, or to be ignorant of. I love the determinative. The position of the arms practically say, I don't know. Okay, that's it for verbs. Now for a few nouns. First, a proper noun, a name. Pronounce it, and you'll have the name of a god. Yes, it's Ptah, 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 a god of creation who is usually shown wearing a distinctive cap and his feet are together, like a mummy's. He was the primary god of the ancient city of Memphis in the north. We'll talk more about him later. Next, try this noun. Pronounce it. Yes, ren. It means name. One last word for today, a conjunction. The ancient Egyptians didn't have a direct parallel for our word and, but they had this word. How is it pronounced? Yes, something like henna. It means together with. So if we wanted to say the man together with the woman, we would have this. And it would have been pronounced something like z henna zet. Now, let's translate some real ancient Egyptian sentences. Here's one. Let's first break it into words that we recognize. Then we'll go after the meaning of the sentence. What's our first word? Yes, it's the verb say or speak. What's next? Yes, man. Okay. Next, another verb, to be silent. Remember the man with his hand to the mouth? It's not a symbol for man, it's a determinative. And our last word? That's right, woman. Now we can go after the overall meaning. Your clue is that it's a sexist maxim. Yes, when man speaks, woman is silent. It would have sounded something like dejet ze gerzet. In spite of this proverb, let me emphasize that women in ancient Egypt had more power and rights than anywhere else in the world. They even had women who ruled as kings, not queens. Because women were important, I bet you can name some Egyptian queens. Name one. Cleopatra is perhaps the most famous. Name another. Good, Nefertiti. Keep going, one more. Hatshepsut, the woman who ruled as king. Now, name an ancient Greek queen. A deathly silence falls over the room. The reason it's more difficult is that the Greek queens weren't important. They didn't go down in history, unlike in Egypt. Okay, let's translate another Egyptian sentence. Take it a word at a time. Yes, the verb is first, and it's is. Then ptah, then in, next is place, boo, and then this. In English, this comes first, but not in hieroglyphs. So our translation would be, ptah is in this place. It would have been pronounced something like, iu ptah embu pen. Good. Now that we're starting to accumulate some real vocabulary words, let's review how we'll set up our dictionary. Let's begin by seeing how we would enter the two forms, masculine and feminine, for another in our dictionaries. First, we'd go to our page that we've set aside for words that begin with K. The top of the page would look like this. Then we'd enter our word. Then in parentheses, put our transliteration to remind us how it sounded, ket. Then we can note it's feminine. And finally, the meaning, another. Same for the masculine form, ki, masculine, another. For pata, we'd go to our page set aside for words beginning with a P and write this. Okay, that's our lesson for today. Now for homework. Let me give you a few sentences and phrases to translate from English into ancient Egyptian. First, the woman does not know this man. Next, Re and Ptah are together in this place. Try, the man does not know another thing. And last, the woman knows this name. That should keep you out of trouble for a while. I'll see you next time.